Have the Reeds with us. The Reeds, for those of you who are not familiar with them, are over at the Cathedral. Dean Reed and his wife Kathy, and they have one daughter, Miss Gracie, who's now, gosh, she's not high school yet.
14, she's high school.
Getting there.
Ninth grade.
Oh, yeah, she is high school. Oh my gosh. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over, swap places with you.
Okay.
And you guys know the drill.
Do you all want an opening statement, or you just want to jump right in?
You can lead off. You can lead off.
I began my adult ministry 12 feet from here. I left Fort Benning, came to St. Andrews, where Kathy had been confirmed the previous April. In the midst of our wedding preparation counseling with Dr. Steenson, he found out my history in youth ministry through college and high school, and he said, "Hey, we're looking for a youth minister. Can you come back tomorrow?" And so 24 hours later, I had a full-time job, and it's like, well, and that opened a lot of doors for me. I had grown up in the Diocese of Texas. I've been told by Bishop Benitez as a freshman in college, when I went to the discernment day, everybody in the room was over 45, except me. I was 19. And he said, "I want you to come back in 20 years, get some life experience, and then we'll talk about priesthood." And that was just his way of doing things. I got here and got settled in, and Dr. Steenson, in like, that was July, in August took me to meet Bishop Pope. He began questioning me, and he said, "Can you go to seminary next month?" I was like, "No, wait, we gotta." So we committed to 2 years here to get some experience, just in ministry in the life of the church, and a little bit of formation under Father Hart. And I don't know if you all remember, some of you St. Andrews folks remember Stephen Gibson. Remember him? He was a great character. But I think I shared this with my deanery earlier, which I probably should have shared everywhere, but just a real brief testimony of why I'm even standing here today. I was baptized at birth, and my parents were faithful about taking me and my sister to church, and my earliest memories are actually in a Sunday school playing in the sand, listening about the story of Jonah and the whale, and Moses and the burning bush. And so those are some of my earliest memories. In fact, I remember a Lenten supper where all we had was chicken noodle broth. And I thought that was like my favorite meal. I was like, oh yeah. So I give part of that credit to my parents for trying to faithfully catechize me in the Christian faith. They were still taking me to church when I was 8 years old, and this was in Liberal, Kansas. And at that time, that particular church, you have Sunday school in the basement for the liturgy of the word. Then for communion, they bring all the kids up, with the peace. And I don't know who her name is, but a lay woman who was teaching Sunday school challenged us to invite Jesus into our hearts. And she said, if you do, he'll come. And so I did, and immediately I knew something was different. My life had changed. 10 minutes later, we walked up the stairs, and I looked down the red carpet in the pews and saw the altar, and I knew that's what I was supposed to do. So not only did I embrace my salvation in that moment, but I was also received a call to ordain ministry. Prior to that, I wanted to be a trash collector or a police officer. So, I can tell you, still in that house in third grade, my parents didn't feel like going to church one Sunday, and I made them do church with me in the living room. And they kind of backed away as I got into junior high and high school for a while. And so me and two other friends in the neighborhood would ride bikes. We were active in choir and acolyting, and I got active in Renewal ministry and Happening. Served as the Diocese of Texas youth president my senior year, so I got to see the politics of life in the church. And back then, we had a week-long, to end our year-long ministry, a week-long convocation where delegates from each youth group would sit in council and vote about things. And what they were doing was they were training us, discipling us to be General Convention delegates, not disciples. It was amazing. So we argued over whether we should change the name of EYC to Episcopal Young Christians. That was what we spent a week arguing about. And so it was identical to General Convention, where you just argue about stuff endlessly. I went to A&M, and I'm taking up all the time, sorry. Went to A&M, went to the Canterbury House, and after my third attempt at going where they were, that particular night was a meditation and New Age prayer and spirituality or something, and I just, I can't do that. So spent some time at St. Mary's, some time at Grace Bible Church, and then a little bit at what is now a very liberal, charismatic Episcopal church. That void that we have filled by planting a church in College Station is fantastic, because those college kids, we need to reach them, and then the Anglicans that actually show up there have no place. I remember St. Thomas, which is across the street from the campus. Some friends of mine going to church there on a Sunday morning, and there were about 12 elderly people, one of which told the kids, "This is not your church, you need to come on Wednesday nights." So you can see how engaged the Episcopal Church was there. Anyway, I'm sorry, I took up all the time, sorry. I wanted to share my testimony since.
I've got a trend starting. I'll do the first question.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to mission. Can you tell me about the mission in your church and how you see the mission in the diocese?
Yeah, the diocese, the bishop and other leaders in the diocese should foster and promote mission at the local level, but that's where it happens. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, and it's specifically in individual one-on-one relationships where you, if you're passionate about Jesus, will share him with someone else. What we do at St. Vincent's is encourage people to be part of our mission strategy. We have usually an annual retreat or annual mission trip to Cambodia, where we work with the Anglican deanery there. We've had a long-term relationship with La Gran Familia in Mexico, which several other churches in the diocese do. We send youth mission trips every summer. This year we've got 2 van loads of kids going to South Dakota, which should be interesting. But I mean, mission is a big part of who we are at St. Vincent's. I mean, it's just something, if you're not on mission, you should be praying for it. And if you're not praying for it, then you better write a check. So, but I mean, as Great Commission Christian, that is the only option for us. I mean, those were the last words Jesus spoke in front of the gathered disciples. Go and make disciples of all nations. I'll try to, am I still good? Volume? Okay.
Father Worley. Hi, thanks for being up here. As you know, St. Andrew's has a particular ethos that's different, distinct in some ways from the majority of its diocese.
Mm-hmm.
We are Reformation Anglicans. The formularies, as they are, and articles are very important to us. Can you speak to that? Speak to our particular situation in comparison to the rest of the diocese?
I know, I mean, the 2 years I was here, I experienced a little of the tension between St. Andrews and the diocese. I actually tried to do my part in reaching out to an assistant priest at All Saints to do a combined youth trip. And when I called him, he was so vulgar on the phone. My rector ended up calling his rector, and he had to call back and apologize. But it was like, that just left a bad taste in my mouth. Fortunately, most of those kind of people aren't with us anymore. I think the life of the diocese is lived out in the local congregation and its local context. And I celebrate what St. Andrews is and has been and will be forever and ever. Amen. I think we all have different gifts at the congregational level to provide to the diocese, and St. Andrews has its own special charism, and I would want to make sure that relationship is healthy. The same pastoral support that a bishop would supply to the rector at St. Albans should be supplied to you as the rector of St. Andrews. In fact, if I were elected, I would want all of the priests to know I've got their back. I mean, I want them to be able to exercise their ministry in the power of the Holy Spirit and make, great accomplishments for God's kingdom. Going back to the one-on-one relationship, I mean, our clergy need to be really pushing the rest of us to be Great Commission Christians, to be passionate about their relationship with Jesus. I think too many Christians, not just, I'm not pointing the finger at the Diocese of Fort Worth, but there's 300,000 congregations in the United States, 270,000 are either in decline or at death's doorstep. That means only 10% are flourishing. And part of that is, I think many of us haven't been raised to be passionate about our relationship with Jesus. And I shared this in 2 of the other meetings, but when I got out of seminary, we lived in Pittsburgh for 3 years, and you heard some of this at lunch, but I'm a big Penguins fan. But what got me involved in rooting for the Penguins was I got to watch Mario Lemieux play. And I think probably the greatest hockey player ever. And I can sit here for the next 30 minutes and tell you why. And I can tell you some of the things he did in games that was just, nobody's ever done before. He's the only person to ever score a goal all 5 ways you can score a goal in a game. Nobody else has ever done that. And the guy was incredible. So now imagine if I were to start talking about Jesus that way with you, and have the same passion and the same excitement. And if our clergy are doing that, that's going to help. I do think we need to be more serious about training in evangelism. How do you share your faith with somebody else? I think congregationally we need to be very serious about where are we engaging our community in local outreach, because it's in that context that you can have those one-on-one encounters with people and be given the opportunity then to share your faith with them. So I'm got way off track from your question. Oh.
Your thoughts if we lose the lawsuit?
Well, let me start by saying sometimes I'm more worried about what happens if we win. None of us have been immune from this, but there is a true spiritual burden, handicap, whatever you want, handcuffs, that's been placed on us by being drawn into this lawsuit. And the example I'll give you is in 2007 and 8, we drew up plans for an outdoor prayer garden and columbarium, outdoor Stations of the Cross with metal fencing and brick column, and it's beautiful. That drawing is still sitting behind my door in my office 10 years later, because none of us wanted to invest or engage, because what if we lose it? My concern is we win, and then we've been, I think, a little complacent. And going back to our passion towards our relationship with Jesus, we've been a little complacent in our commitment to discipling and to making disciples. And I think we need, the bishop, along with the College of Priests, need to communicate a vision that excites our people to do the work of evangelism. Now, if we lose, the church in each of these local communities is going to have a short-term plan, and then we need, as a diocese, to come together and deal with long-term plans. I was married in that building 100 yards from here, and it's one of the most beautiful churches I've ever been in, but it's not the church. It's a building. This is the church, and this is what's important. And so St. Vincent's has a short-term plan to deal with the first couple months if we were to lose, to reorganize, and it may be that we partner with, Church and Hearst or whatever, but that'll take some strategic thinking. But I think that may be more exhilarating for people than the strategic thinking we're going to need if we win, because we've got to recommit ourselves to being evangelists. And that, like I said, once again, I need to be catechized into that. It's just not going to happen overnight. I need to be trained up and brought up in my own discipleship so that I'm passionate enough about it that I'm willing to talk about how someone else can become a disciple. There are some things the congregation can do that can help foster that. A healing center, Order St. Luke's chapter. I know St. Andrew's had a sandwich ministry here for a year, may still. So there are ways that we can engage our community to help make that happen, but I'll stop.
When I think back on my own Christian walk, and I think about things that were very important to Diane and I before I ever got into seminary, and really what holds us together as a couple, what's been so important to my own life as a priest, I look at certain things I did, and I was just reminded of this and just listening to you right now about how you have to be catechized and brought up and formed. Programs like Curcio and other kinds of renewal programs just were hugely important to me. And over the years as a priest for a very long time, I was promoting that and trying to have it in our parish. That kind of renewal life was very much a part of this diocese for a very long time.
Mm.
I have some very wonderful memories of Bishop Iker when he was still rector at Redeemer in Sarasota, and coming to the weekends that I was on, and the talks he gave were just amazing. And then it's like the bottom dropped out.
Mm-hmm.
And criticism started developing among some of the clergy even about it, and sort of fear about what it is and so forth. And I really think that part of the reason that our parishes, and I'll say St. John's even to be a part of it, doesn't have that kind of awareness of the life of the Spirit is because we don't have venues, or very simple venues,
Mm-hmm.
that are still left to promote that.
Yeah.
So, now, with that all being said, where are you in what we would call the renewal ministry? How would we maybe help to re-energize this?
Yeah. I think I got a quick answer and a long answer. I'll try to do both, actually. The short answer is I was rector of Happening 35 in the Diocese of Texas. I've been to a Walk to Emmaus as a spiritual director, and I've been to closing at Kairos weekends. I've seen the life-changing ministry that those things have. My daughter went to New Beginnings in November. So I'm a big fan of it because I know it works wonders in people's lives, but not in place of doing the same work that you and I should be doing as spiritual leaders of a local congregation. So if I think I'm just going to ship people off to Cursillo and I don't have to help fan the flames of the Spirit, I think I'm missing the point. So I would say the renewal ministries are a wonderful, it's like the icing on the cake, but not the cake itself. Because I think in the day-to-day, you can go away for a weekend, get really charged up, come home, but if there's some sense of passion and following the guide, walking in the power of the Holy Spirit as a community of disciples, that's something that can be fostered. And I'm not talking about you have to raise your hands in church or speak in tongues or roar like a lion or anything like that. It's embracing, the life-giving Spirit that we receive through faith and through baptism. In some sense, it's simply, receiving that promise that's already been given, and it's hard to do. I'm the first to say I could do so much better in my own ministry at that. So it's a challenge. And every one of us in here, you guys gave up a whole Saturday, and I'm sure it hurt. There's things you're probably missing. Your kid, well, maybe not today, but softball and football and whatever else is going on. So it's a challenge in our day and age, but it's necessary. It's a part of who we are as disciples.
So it's something that you would help to support, re-energize our diocese with.
Yeah. But I think I would really want to spend, one thing we don't have currently is time for our clergy just to be together. We get 3 hours at the beginning of the clergy retreat every year, and that's it. And I think we've got to spend time together in fellowship and prayer and support, finding out, how's your family doing, how your kids, can we pray for you? We need more of that, and then in that context, hopefully our bishop would then also provide some leadership and direction in terms of a vision going forward, and whatever training we need to build into that. But I do think the renewal movement can be a very helpful component in all of that. Back to the idea real quick of vision. We have, 60 congregations, and if you're lucky, you see the bishop for 2 hours once every 65 weeks or something. I think early on, our next bishop ought to commit himself to spending a serious amount of time in every community that we have congregations. And yeah, you know, downtown Fort Worth and St. John's, you know, I mean, a lot of us know that context and culture, but spending time with the people in the parish and you know, going to lunch and just listening to kind of where they see God leading them as well. I think that would be a helpful thing, and a bishop who could go to Henrietta and have lunch with the vicar there and visit with his family, but then also not only meet the small number of folks that are part of that church, but also just kind of be in that community and see what's going on in Henrietta. How could we engage them in some way where we could bring the love of God and the gospel of Christ to them. So anyway, that's just one thought I had. Way off track now. Sorry. Okay.
This has been asked by other people in previous sessions, but can we get your thoughts on seminary education and what that might look like in your vision?
Well, I'm in favor of it, but I also realize we have seminary education thoughts on that. I know with the financial struggles and some of the political battles between TEC and Nashotah House has been through some difficult times, and I don't know how much longer they have with the financial struggle they're facing. I think we need to step back and look at, you know, what do we need to have happen, not only for priests but deacons in terms of training. Some things could be done in a local church like this under, you know, the direction of a rector who could help with the formation process. We've got really talented lay people and priests throughout the diocese, and maybe tapping into some of that would be helpful as well. I went to Trinity, and they're a biblically orthodox place. The Reformed Episcopal Seminary in Philadelphia. Don't know anything about it. I've only heard good things, but that's because I was talking to Reformed Episcopal guys. But you know, I just, and I'm an alumni associate in Nashotah House, so you know, I'm willing to look at any avenue that best fits us. I mean, the formation and the training and the education need to be there, or else we're hurting, you know, our congregations and the people we put in charge. Paul went for 3 years into this reflection and prayer time before answering the call to be a apostle to the Gentiles, and so something's got to happen in that regard. But it seems like there may be some cards that are going to have to be put on the table now, or at least going forward, because I don't know how much longer Nashotah has.
Back over here to this Mayo.
Well, Father Reed or Ryan, I'm just going to call you Ryan, you're a long time friend.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're, of course, very heavily involved and have been, and we're blessed to have that with ACNA.
Mm-hmm.
And you're on the Provincial Council, and you've been to GAFCON several times. So would you just tell us how you feel? Certainly that's a very timely topic today, how you feel about ACNA at the present, what your hopes and dreams are for the future for our diocese and ACNA. Just your feelings about GAFCON, the whole, because those are so pertinent to where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to be in communion with other Christians, and a diocese standing on its own is not going to survive very long. I mean, that interconnectedness of the church universal is an important part of who we are as Anglicans, and we're not, you know, Southern Baptists, and I mean, that's not our ethos. GAFCON, I think, has created a safe space for many Anglicans. The ACNA, I had the privilege of being as a steering committee member of the ACNA network, which led to a member of the Common Cause Roundtable, which led to the establishment of the ACNA, and then St. Vincent's hosted the inaugural assembly. I got to go and participate in the crafting of the Constitution and canons, and so I have a vested interest in the success of the ACNA. I also recognize that within Anglican, I mean, Father Jake brought it up. I mean, you have a different churchmanship at St. Andrews than you have at St. Vincent's, but we're still tied together as a family. Some of the theological issues we face in the ACNA are, I think, at a little bit higher level than, say, the difference between St. John's and St. Andrews. There's a whole different ecclesiastical understanding, different understanding of holy orders and sacraments and all the rest. But for the first time since I've been a Christian, we're actually welcome at the table and included and valued. So the people that we as a diocese may disagree with, in the ACNA are people I call friends. I mean, I've worked with them for 15 years now, and that doesn't mean we back down from what it is we've received and want to hand on to future generations, but we need to remain engaged, in those conversations. Not to, throw water on the fire or anything, but I think most Orthodox Anglicans worldwide are going to have a major challenge in the next few years, because I think it's very likely the Bishop of London will become the next Archbishop of Canterbury. And when she's enthroned as the Archbishop of Canterbury, you're going to have Nigeria and Myanmar and Malawi and Central and places everywhere going, how are we really connected? When she was first moved into the Bishop of London spot, everybody's saying, well, she's really kind of Orthodox. I mean, she was a nurse. She's married to a man, which is more than you can say for many of the women bishops. And so, maybe there was hope that she'd be kind of a Geraldine Wolfe type, if you remember the Bishop of Rhode Island. She's not. Apparently, I just heard in one of the last meetings, she's promoting Muslim prayers at St. Paul's Cathedral. So it's a sad state of affairs. But nevertheless, that question is going to be before us. And I would say the question's going to be called a little bit on September 21st, because the four of us that have been nominated and put forth in front of you, I think we would all have a big hesitation at inviting ACNA bishops who are ordaining women to the priesthood. And if they don't receive invitations, that is going to, what's the expression, something hitting the fan, it is going to cause issues. And so, whether we're dealing with that relationship, just like in local parish ministry, when you're dealing with, someone who's gone through divorce or experimenting sex, you got to respond pastorally and with love and charity, without backing down from the ideals that we know God has revealed to us in Scripture and tradition. Yeah. Okay.
Kathy, I've asked all the other wives. Would you share maybe your hopes and concerns?
Oh, that's okay.
No, it's recording.
My hopes, concerns. Well, first and foremost, my ministry is to Ryan. And so normally in our past, we've walked side by side. And so I would be there for him. And then as the diocese as a whole, our mission mindedness. And he's repeated that 4 times now today, that needs to be first and foremost. And then also our clergy wives. We have to take care of them as well. And I think the bishop's wife would need to step into that role, as Donna did, and continue that ministry as well. So, thank you.
See?
I've known briefly, it's no longer with you, but you've had a couple of curates, Father Jeff Moore and then Father Stephen Jones, whose institution I went to in Cleveland. Both of them have gone to Rome. Would you ever go to Rome?
Not unless there was no other option. I'm an Anglican, and I think Petrine, if you like, non-papal Catholicism is a valid expression of the universal church. I can't imagine a scenario where I would leave Anglicanism, but I'm not real excited about the Bishop of London being the Archbishop of Canterbury, although, right now, other than through our connection with the Southern Cone, we're really not in communion with them anymore. I've lived in broken communion my entire life because I've been in the Episcopal Church. I say that. It was when I was at EYC council my senior year as president when I was told by the priest in charge of the youth for the diocese that we would have a woman priest at that conference speak on. We had 4 topics, and one of them had to be, I think she was the second legally ordained woman in the Episcopal Church, something like that. And nobody on the council agreed with it, but we were teenagers and the priest said, you have to do this. Yeah, no, the answer right now is no. I do have a great desire for unity of the church, but not at the expense of losing who we are. And also defining what unity means. I mean, you know, there are different kinds of unity, and I mean, full communion would be wonderful with everybody, but there are doctrinal things and dogmatic things that we don't embrace or that others don't that we do. But at the devotional level, there are things we can do with all kinds of Christians, you know, so.
I'm relating a lot to you today because I also had similar experiences at Aggieland as we for the planting of information, and as son of St. Vincent's, being back there, it feeds my soul, you know. So I appreciate what you know today is to you. So another kind of hard question. The diocese as a whole, the last 10 years, probably because of the lawsuit, the spiritual chain, as you talked about, was good phrasing. We're in a season of stagnation or decline, and saw on the report that St. Vincent especially kind of a season of significant decline, and I was wondering your thoughts on some of the main reasons for that, and how you are trying to inspire health and growth, and what that can mean for the diocese as a whole as well. I think you're in a good position for that. So.
Yeah, we've, this is going to be a bit of a long answer. 2009 with the 2008 with separation, we only lost one person publicly who wanted to stay with TEC, you know, out of 750 people. But I do think there were others who maybe quietly drifted off in the next couple of years. We struggled to keep the school going, and when we closed that in 2016, we took a big hit. We're up 6% right now for this year in attendance, so that's a good sign. The other thing, and I learned my lesson, was I changed the time of the third service, 15 minutes, and we lost a third of that congregation overnight. And after 3 or 4 months, it wasn't working, so we went back. Well, none of them ever came back. And I think they felt devalued. You know, if you're going to change our service, why not the other two? You know, I'm not sure. Nobody ever came and complained. They just stopped coming. So that was another thing. So what we've done since this trend has been going on since 2009, we brought the AAC in to try a revitalization deal, and that didn't seem to get any traction. We've had David Roseberry come in. We did some helpful things there that have been implemented. What we're not going to get, I don't think, from any of the candidates that we put before ourselves is someone who's going to wave a wand and suddenly our churches are going to fill up. I think we've got to do the hard work of catechizing the people that we have, and then empowering them, you know, to share the gospel and make disciples of others. And that has to be the primary focus of the priest. If the rector is so busy in meetings that he isn't even discipling people, you know, we've got a problem there. I mean, so there isn't an easy fix. And what I would hope is that our next bishop, whatever protocols or procedures are put in place to develop this, really does communicate a vision of evangelism and outreach for the entire diocese, with, I think, some specific focuses. One, multi-generational, i.e., especially the young population. Where we have them, we need to empower them and charge them to really go out. You know, I said this, is Hubbard in here? No. Yeah, Hubbard has, you know, they may only have like 20 teenagers in the entire city, so probably focusing youth ministry in that direction may not be a good resource. But in these areas that we're living in, especially these two deaneries, you know, we've got young priests, we've got young lay leaders. We need to get them together and empower them and charge them and train them and send them out. And let's do everything we can to reach people with the gospel. I'm not sure if I answered your question fully.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Oh, yeah, whoever new bishop is, I hope that he would gather the clergy, would share a vision, however that's developed, for where we believe God's leading us, and that he would then hopefully get the clergy, the priests, the rectors especially, to buy in and then implement and embrace at the local level, because the diocese isn't going to grow any particular church. You know, it's going to happen, you know, right here. And somebody was asking me in the very first session, and he kept asking over and over again, what are you going to do to fill up our churches? And there's nothing the bishop can do to fill up your church.
Over to Rob and then back here.
What does the word mission to you according to Matthew 28?
Mm-hmm.
And if you were elected as a bishop, how will you apply it to work? Diocese?
Well, I mean, what I've been doing at St. Vincent's, we've been engaged in world mission in Cambodia, Mexico, and then domestically. Matthew 28, 16 through 20 are the last words that Jesus left his church. And that means they're probably pretty important. It is a command, you know, go therefore and make disciples, baptizing and teaching them all that I've commanded you. That's who we have to be. And I think that vision is easy for a bishop to push and promote. Most of the relationships that we have today came because Bishop Eicher said, we're going to be Great Commission Christians. And so we've developed partnerships, you know, around in other dioceses. I think pooling our resources, last year, St. Peter and Paul and Christ the Redeemer and St. Vincent's did a youth mission trip together. We've got very gifted people. We just need to send them out. St. Vincent's 2 years ago did a mission trip to Brownsville, and if we had a couple people from San Juan or Santa Ana's, I mean, it would have been so much more effective. It was a great trip, don't get me wrong, but there were at times a little bit of communication barriers, and it was wonderful though. But I'm just saying, we've got the resources in the diocese to fulfill Jesus' call on us to be Great Commission Christians. También necesitamos un obispo que habla en español, and all four of us any of the four of us would have to make that a priority immediately. I mean, multi-generational and multi-ethnic. I mean, it's not just, Fort Worth is becoming more and more Hispanic, but the middle of Arlington and the mid-cities has got a ton of African immigrants, some of whom have come to the United States already as Anglicans, and they just can't find the door to the church. You know, if the sign says St. Albans Episcopal, they just drive right by it. Others, if they walk into St. Vincent's and they see the Stations of the Cross, and if somebody doesn't grab them right away, they think, oh, this is a Catholic church, and they leave. So we've got to be ready to engage the people that are in our communities. I mean, God has brought the entire world to our doorstep. TCC over by St. Stephen's and Hearst, I bet every nation is represented there. And most of those kids there never enter an American home. And there's just nobody engaging them. And so college campus ministries like that, where maybe we have 10 people in our church who sign up to host, kids at Thanksgiving, so they can come see what a meal is in a home in the United States. I mean, that's just ideas that are out there. But
Rob, and then back to you, insert here.
Father Reed, if you're elected bishop as the chief pastor to the pastors, kind of describe what your style or your approach would be to pastoring the rectors and all the clergymen of the diocese in order to help them shepherd flourishing parishes. Well,
all of us as Anglican priests are called to incarnational ministry, which means, and especially the bishop, and you need to go to where the people are, i.e. where the priest is, and engage them. And I think I said trying to get us all together on a more regular basis would be, I think, an important thing that we could do. just for prayer support, for one thing. But that kind of approach of making sure, every priest in his family is engaged by the bishop and in a face-to-face on a regular basis. What are your hopes? What are your dreams? What are your needs? How can I pray for you? What can I do to help your ministry? I think that is the role of the chief shepherd. It's, there's a dauntingness to that as well. I think Bishop Iker has been an amazing, we all think of him as the Lion of Fort Worth, and he goes off and defends the faith in these venues. But I think where he's had the most impact is in the life of the clergy in this diocese and the pastoring that he's done to us. He's been a fantastic bishop that way. And what I like is he errs on the side of supporting the clergy, first and foremost. And I think the priests in this diocese need to know that their bishop has their back, and then he's then empowering them to work in the power of the Spirit to bring about the transforming love of Jesus in a community. So, yeah.
Okay, my question is very easy. When we're talking about mission, you answer about mission trips. That's fine. We're going somewhere else and preach the word of God. We're talking about mission, and you answer about college and all these kind of things. But my question is about what's the plan to reach our neighborhoods?
Yeah.
It's different going to there and the college, but our neighborhood.
Right. The technical books on evangelism and mission, evangelism is, me engaging you because we're similar cultures. For me then to go into your neighborhood where most people are Hispanic, that would be much closer to mission. But at the local level, I think I would refer more to outreach and evangelism than mission. Whereas I think of mission where you're crossing cultural divides, even if the distance is only, next door. And I think I said this earlier, if we're not about outreach and evangelism, we're not going to be here in 10 years or 15 years. We've got to get passion for the gospel and sharing who Jesus is and what he means to me. That's got to become a priority for all of our people. You guys do a great job of it because I know San Miguel's is full, so somebody's doing something right there. So maybe some of us who may be struggling a little bit with the whole inviting, evangelizing, engaging the community could maybe come and sit down with you and your people and say, teach us, Christ Church Waco is doing a great job of reaching college kids and even college professors, So what's working there that perhaps could work at Breckenridge, All of this is going to have to be, all of this vision of really re-engaging the communities around us is going to have to be locally adapted, because what works at San Miguel's is not going to work at St. Timothy's necessarily. And those are a mile apart or something? 2 miles apart. So that's where the leadership of the priests really comes into play, and the lay people. Did that answer your question a little bit? If we're not about mission as you defined it, then.
Well, my question is because I live in quite a few blocks from St. Vincent's, and I walk in the Kroger in my neighborhood, and I was with my cola, and a lady, African American lady, come and said, "Are you Anglican priest?" And I say, "Yes, I am Anglican priest." So where is the next church? And I say, St. Vincent. Oh, is it Roman Catholic?
Yes, yeah, I did share that, didn't I? She probably walked in, saw the Stations of the Cross, and said that in Uganda that would be a Roman Catholic church, not an Anglican church. Yeah, and if somebody didn't grab her right away, she is going to walk out thinking that was a Roman Catholic church, and I don't want to be part of that. I want to be Anglican.
He's in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
He's from Anglican.
Yeah. And we've tried a couple different strategies on reaching out to the African immigrants, and actually the ACNA has got a good program with Caminos Juntos. The Anglican immigration office, or whatever they're calling that ministry, would obviously apply to Africans as well as the Vietnamese and others. And it might be a wonderful outreach tool in some of our local communities. Sorry.
What would your vision be or plan as far as getting past the lawsuit, planting new churches?
There's a spiritual and a strategic component to church planting. Anyone that thinks, oh, we're just going to go plant 10 more churches and everything will be fine, is missing the boat. There are plenty of churches in the however many counties we make up now. There's a lot of churches, okay? Our first focus, I think, needs to be on evangelism and catechizing, making disciples who are willing to make disciples. And if we can begin flourishing in certain places where we can see a need. 15 years ago, I think, St. Andrews talked about planting a church up in Saginaw. Now, if we'd done that 15 years ago, that may be the biggest church in the diocese right now. That place is just, there's home after home after home, all the way up 287, to Rome. I mean, and I know that fell apart, and I know why, but we missed a big opportunity there. And so the churches that have the resources to do church planting in areas where it would be helpful to have a church, we need to promote that and help them, and maybe a couple churches come together to do that. But the first course of action, needs to be all of us engaging in our call to be evangelists.
Regarding the church planting, we've got Waco, we've got College Station. We're outside of our normal geographical boundaries. Do you want to continue spreading outward in that way?
Well, I mean, until the ACNA gets its house in order, I don't know what other option we have. I know it can be difficult because in College Station we're kind of invading Clark Lowenfield's diocese, and that creates some issues. But until, and I'll just share this because we had this conversation at Executive Committee in February. We were talking about re-upping or allowing the missionary diocese of All Saints to elect a new bishop. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's a non-geographic diocese that is mostly Forward in Faith parishes. So there's no women priests. Well, there's a whole nother diocese called Church for the Sake of Others, and it's formed in a non-geographic way so that it can have women priests. And my question at the meeting to the Archbishop was, what is the Governance Task Force doing to restore us to a more Catholic understanding or traditional understanding of what a diocese is, a geographic area under a bishop? And he said they're doing nothing because we haven't answered the question of holy orders yet. So that's another, not just in ecumenical talks, but even in us as a province getting our house in order, it's holding us back. But I mean, until such time as somebody says, okay, here's the boundaries. And to get to that point, I've seen it now in South Carolina, North Carolina, where one Anglican, because in Dallas there's 6, 7 Anglican jurisdictions. In Hearst there's 4. Just that little city, up and down precinct line, 4 different Anglican churches. One's Episcopalian, so forget that. But the other 3 they all stand for the same thing. They all believe the same thing. They're just in different jurisdictions. So you got 3 different bishops, ministering to those 3 little congregations. So at some point we got to get our house in order. Yeah. Now I forgot where I was going with that. Yeah, geographical. Until that, I mean, if people want to plan, if people are calling us and saying we've got 30 people here who want to be Anglican, and there's, if it's Anchorage, Alaska, go for it. Let's do it. And all that other stuff will get sorted out over time. I mean, in the ebb and flows of church history, we get off track, and God slowly brings us back on track. Sometimes more quickly than we want, but yeah.
Do you consider yourself a person of peace? If so, why?
Person of peace. Yes. I mean, despite the fact that I was an infantry officer, once, and I trained for the very opposite, but I mean, you train for war so there can be peace ultimately. But I do think, the spiritual fruits, the spiritual gifts that are given, I mean, I do try to embrace that. I'm not a big fan of conflict, but when it has to happen, it has to happen. But even in that context, I want reconciliation as quickly as possible. I don't want to go to sleep angry at somebody, for instance. But in some sense, the relationship that I have with Jesus, the fact that I know He's my Savior and I attempt to make Him the Lord of my life, brings about that wholeness that which peace represents. I mean, we can be in all kinds of conflict and still be people of peace, because we're grounded in our faith in Jesus. And so I would say yes in that respect. I mean, some of the most faithful Christians I've met were special force operators who've done horrible things, from our context, but they love the Lord, and so.
Father, there's been many changes in this country, by generations, the baby boomers and the millennials, or whatever you want. I don't know what the next group is going to be called. But would you have any plans, if you were to become a bishop, to create something like maybe a think tank of people, a group of people within the diocese that would try to anticipate the needs and the changes? Because I've lived through 60 some odd years of where things have not, the world around us has changed, but the basic approach of the Episcopal, the Anglican Church hadn't necessarily changed all that much.
Yeah.
But would you think it would be of any value to create some sort of a unit that would try to plan what we might ought to be doing in the future?
Well, that may not be a bad idea, but the reality is we're probably not doing enough to engage what we have in the present. Does that make sense? I mean, how many millennials do you see at church on Sunday morning?
But would you have any plans to do both?
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it. And I think a moment ago I was talking about gathering up the young clergy, the leaders that have come out of Camp Crucis, and they're teenagers and 20s, and the kids from St. Michael's Conference, and get them together and say, how do we turn you loose? How do, so that's one aspect. I'm not sure there's any way to anticipate the values and needs of any particular generation until it's already there.
Well, I was raised in an industry where we had a dedicated group of guys that their job was to try to anticipate what the Air Force in this case was going to need in the future.
Yeah.
And we would plan for it accordingly.
Yeah.
It may never happen,
right?
But at least
there was some thought going into it.
Plans for it.
Yeah, it would be harder to do with a future generation not knowing, but I think we're not even anticipating what our current generations need. And if we could just start there, we would be incredibly benefited by it.
You'd have to set priorities.
Yeah.
Coming up on about a 5-minute warning. Just kind of giving you a heads up if you're sitting on a question. There you go.
So we've talked about seminary and supporting seminary and education, but are we fostering people that are thinking they're seeing a calling, opportunities for them coming out of seminary have become more and more limited. So what kind of things can we do to say to people, if you think you're having a calling, here are the opportunities for you. We've got a plan for you.
I think we're going to have to be creative in some sense, and it may be doing things differently. Maybe a young priest who feels called to church planning works half-time at a pre-existing church, and then, so there's some overlap. I mean, depending on where St. Paul was There were times when the local church supported him. There were times when he made tents in order to get food, money for food. And so, if we're entering an age in which we may need more tent maker type ordained leadership, that may be the reality we have. But I mean, even the thought of some of the ACNA dioceses, for example, have bishops who are also rectors, or rectors of the cathedral, I think, in some case. It's a creative way of reducing costs, but it also then does, our expectation is we have a bishop devoted to us as a bishop, it would reduce his amount of time to engage with all of the other congregations. So that may not be the best strategy, but it is a strategy that's being used. And I think we need to look at all of that, and especially for, raising up new ordained ministry. We're getting to the point, and even if we were breaking even every year, health costs are going up 20% a year, or whatever the number is. Cost of living goes up, and so even if all of our parishes had the same number of people donating and attending and participating in the life of the church it had 20 years ago, we still couldn't afford. I remember 20 years ago, Canon Huff, Bishop Iker would say, if you have a church of 100 people, you can afford a full-time priest and a part-time secretary and maybe pay an organist on Sunday. So you can survive with 100 people. Today, I don't know that you could, unless they're fairly wealthy and they're all committed to tithing, just you may not know this, the insurance for a clergy family, health insurance, I think it's $24,000 a year now, something like that. And on top of that, now we pay a whole lot higher money up front until we get to when they start deducting. I mean, you got to pay like $3,000 per person or something before you ever get the benefits of the. I mean, it's crazy. But that's the reality we face, and I think we're going to have to be creative, not just in how we maintain what we've got, but how we raise up new leadership.
Mark had a hand up, but does anyone else who's not yet asked a question sitting on one want to ask before we circle back around in the final few minutes?
Father Reed, I know you're a man of many strengths and probably no weaknesses.
Oh.
But this has been a question that has been asked with our former 3 candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So would you tell us, and Kathy, I'd love to hear from you, what those strengths might be and what you think your strengths are, and if there's a weakness, what that might be?
I will do my best. I'm not one, I say this proudly, I'm not one to toot my own horn. But enough about me. What do you think about me? I do think I have a pastor's heart. I do try to engage people in charity. I am committed to the apostolic faith and orders. We've received it. I love to teach. I love doing this right here, actually, and engaging with people. I love to preach. I've not heard a lot of people complain about my sermons. I've heard of only a couple people actually say they were good. So somewhere in between there. I'm not sure I could say that's a strength, but I love preaching. I think my curacy at St. Vincent's helped me navigate my way through liturgy almost immediately. I mean, Father Tabola, cracked the whip, and you would not make a mistake, because you'd have to deal with his wrath. Strengths, what else? I am a Rangers fan. I shot an 82 playing golf back in October, but typically I'm up in the high 90s. I mean, I love people, and I love our Lord, and He loves people, so I've got that going. The weaknesses, I don't know. I mean, you could probably get some really good answers over here. I mean, I think sometimes, well, first of all, I'm extremely introverted. So as much as I love what I do on Sunday, at 12:30 when I get home, I'm done. So in 1 minute, and when I walk out of here, I'm done. I mean, I love doing this, but it absolutely, and so I have to recharge and quiet, and I don't know if that's a weakness. I mean, I know we're all different, but I think I could sometimes avoid being in a public place just because I know it's going to suck the life right out of me. I probably can be a little self-centered at times. I mean, just dealing with my own fallenness. I think there's probably too many weaknesses to list them all, but
Sounds like you're normal.
I hope so. Being in ministry, I'm not sure any of us are really normal. I would like to be I would have always wanted to be a deeper theological thinker. And so right now I'm reading a book on heaven and the new Israel and it's a textbook, and it's just like a beating to get through. I do think theologically, but probably more at like a 8th grade level than, say, Thomas Aquinas or something like that. But I think to be in a leadership role in the church, you need to know theology and history and the scriptures, and so I try to engage that on a regular basis. And some things I do retain. So what other weaknesses did I forget?
We like food.
Oh, I don't miss any meals. I am on a weight loss program and it's going well, but I love to cook and I love to eat. And
Cooking, very therapeutic.
but then I eat what I cook, and it's like I love to get in the kitchen and just like grab some different things and just be creative and let it come out. I don't ever Google recipes or anything like that. I just think, okay, I think this would be good, and put it together and eat it, and I love doing that. I don't know. I would never go on a America's Best Chef show or whatever like that. Because I won't follow the rules when it comes to cooking. So I do try to follow the rules in the rest of life. I know another weakness. Sometimes I get a little. No, I get a little angry when I'm driving at people who are going 40 in a 65 or 90 in a 65. But mostly it's with the slower people. I get frustrated. I've never signaled them that they were number one. But she can tell you. Should I tell that story?
I'm going to save you by the bell.
I think it's funny.